welcome to another episode of English Fluency. Today we have a very exciting topic. Okay, በዚህ ዛሬ ትምህርት የምንማረው ስለ ክርክር ነው። በእንግሊዝኛው ደግሞ ዲቤት ይባላል። What is debate? Debate ወይም ክርክር ምን ማለት ነው? ፓርት 1 ላይ እናያለን ማለት ነው what's debate. ፓርት 2 why do we debate? ለምን እንከራከራለን? ፓርት 3 how do you conduct a debate? እንዴት ነው ክርክር የምናካሄደው? ፓርት 4 expressions for debate. ለክርክር የሚያገለግሉ expressions እናያለን። ፓርት 5 tips for effective debate. ውጤታማ ክርክር ለማካሄድ የሚያስፈልጉት ቲፖች እነግራችኋለሁ። ፓርት 1 what's debate? ክርክር ማለት ምንድን ነው? So what exactly is debate? A debate is a formal expression where people present different arguments about a specific topic. It's not just a casual conversation or an argument with emotions. No, debate is structured. It's organized and it follows specific rules. ክርክር ማለት በአንድ የተወሰነ ርዕስ ላይ የሚደረግ የተዋቀረ ውይይት ነው። ክርክር ስንል በስሜት መጨቃጨቅ ሳይሆን በምክንያትና በማስረጃ የተደገፈ አቋም ማቅረብ ማለት ነው። In a debate we have two sides, ሁለት ሳይድ አለ። The proposition, affirmative side አለ. This side agrees with the topic or supports the idea. The opposition ደግሞ negative side ምንድነው? This side disagrees with the topic or argues against the idea. ስለዚህ ሁለት ወገኖች አሉ ማለት ነው ክርክር ላይ። አንደኛው ወገን የሚደግፍ ሲሆን ሁለተኛው ወገን የሚቃወም ነው። ስለዚህ እነዛን በደንብ ለዚህ የሚጠቅሙ እንትኖችን በደንብ እናያለን ማለት ነው ዛሬ። Let's check out this, okay? አሁን the proposition, the affirmative, the side agrees with what the topic or support the idea. Their job is what? To build a case for something, And negative side ደግሞ ሌላኛው ሳይድ ደግሞ the opposition ነው። The opposition or negative. This side disagrees, okay, with the topic or argues against the idea. Their job is to tear down, the case against something. ያ ነው እንትናቸው። ስለዚህ ሁለት ወገኖች አሉ ማለት ነው። አንደኛው ወገን የሚደግፍ ሲሆን ሁለተኛው ወገን ደግሞ የሚቃወም ነው። Now let's look at how the same category of expression is used by these two different sides. We'll build up either your toolkit accordingly. Part 2 ደግሞ why do we debate? ለምን እንከራከራለን? Why is debate important? ለምንድን ነው? Why do we need to learn how to debate? ለምን ነው መማር የሚያስፈልገን? Debate first. Debate helps us, think critically. Okay, we learn to analyze issues from different perspectives. ክርክር በማድረግ በማንኛውም ጉዳይ ላይ በጥልቅ ማሰብ እንማራለን. Second, debate improves, your research skills. To support your arguments, we need facts, evidence, and examples. ማስረጃ እንዲኖር መመርመርና መፈለግ ይጠበቅብናል። Third, debate builds what? Confidence. Standing, in front of people and expressing, your ideas correctly, clearly ማለት ነው. That takes, courage. በሰዎች ፊት ቆሞ ሀሳብን ማቅረብ በራስ መተማመንን ይጨምራል. And finally, debate enhances what? Our fluency in English. Okay? The more we practice speaking, the smoother and more natural we become. እንግሊዝኛን በደንብ በመናገር ቋንቋ ላይ ያለና ቃላት የመናገር ክህሎት ያሳድግልናል። ስለዚህ ለዚህ ነው የሚያስፈልገን ማለት ነው። ስለዚህ ፓርት 3 ደግሞ how do we conduct a debate? ክርክር እንዴት እናካሄዳለን? Now, let me explain how we actually conduct a debate. The structure is very important. በጣም ወሳኝ አስፈላጊ የሆኑ ኤክስፕሬሽኖች እናያለን. A typical debate follows what? This order. Opening statement ለምሳሌ የመጀመሪያው each side presents what? Their main argument. This is where you introduce your position. መክፈቻ ላይ እያንዳንዱ ወገን ዋና መከራከሪያ ነጥባቸውን ያቀርባሉ አይደል? ሁለተኛው constructive speech ነው. This is where you build your case with evidence and examples. በዚህ ክፍል ዋና መከራከሪያ ሀሳባችሁን በማስረጃ ታጠናክራላችሁ ማለት ነው። Rebuttals, number 3. Here you respond to what the other side's arguments. You point out weakness and defend your position. የተቃዋሚ ወገን ሀሳብ መልሳችሁ የምትከራከሩበት ክፍል። Cross examination, number 4. This is when you ask questions, to the other side. It's like in a conversation but with a purpose. በዚህ ክፍል ለተቃዋሚ ወገን ጥያቄዎችን ታቀርባላችሁ ማለት ነው። Part 5 ምንድነው? Closing statements ነው፣ መዝጊያ ንግግሮች። Finally, you summarize your main points and end with a powerful conclusion. በማጠቃለያ ዋና ዋና ነጥባችሁን ደግማችሁ ታቀርባላችሁ ማለት ነው። ስለዚህ በ5 ደረጃ የተከፈለ ነው ማለት ነው ዲቤት ስናካሄድ። በእያንዳንዱ ስር እንግዲህ የሚያስፈልጉ የሚጠቅሙ ኤክስፕሬሽኖችን በደንብ ተንትነን እናያለን። Part 4 expressions for debate። አራተኛው የክርክር አገላለጾች ምን ናቸው? Now let's look at the most important part of today's list. The expressions we use, in debates. On the whiteboard, I have written many useful phrases, as you can see in the middle. Many useful phrases are there. Okay, let me explain them. Okay, category by category. Okay, now welcome everyone. Today we're going to build a powerful toolkit for debate, focusing on the exact phrases, okay, that will make your arguments clear, confident, and convincing. We'll be incorporating a comprehensive list of expressions. Okay, let's get started. Category 1, opening statements. Okay, when you begin your speech, okay, you need strong opening statements. Look at the board. You might start by saying what? Ladies and gentlemen, today we're here to discuss እንችላለን or clearly state ለምሳሌ the topic we will debate is, or it's crucial immediately to declare your position, okay, with a phrase like I stand in favor of or I stand against. This phrase help you start confidently. They tell the audience and the judge what your position is. For instance, you could say ለምሳሌ to begin with I would like to present my position on እንግዲህ እነዚህ አረጎች ንግግራችሁን በልብ በሙሉነት ሊጀምሩ ለመጀመር ይድሯቸዋል ማለት ነው። Category 2, presenting arguments. Firstly, I believe that is a perfect way, by the way, to introduce your first point. You can then explain out ለምሳሌ the main reason for my instance is እንላለን and emphasize. It's important to note that ወይም ደግሞ one key point is that notice how this phrase organize your thoughts. Firstly, introduce your first point. Then to build your case, use furthermore. I would like to highlight, or additionally, research showed that a powerful way to deepen your argument is to say, let's consider the implications of. This structure makes your argument clear and easy to follow. በእነዚህ አረቦች ሀሳባችሁን በስርዓት ለማቅረብ ይረዷቸዋል። Category 3, supporting evidence. ማስረጃ ማቅረቢያ አረቦች. Your arguments need what? Evidence. Here are phrases to introduce your evidence and build credibility, okay? According to source ጠቅሳላችሁ. Then must, you can also state, statistics reveal that, or studies have shown that, ጥናቶች እንደሚያሳዩት እንደምንለው, then make it concrete by saying, for example, and solidify your point with. This is evident when we look at, okay? When you say, according to research, or studies show, your argument becomes what? Stronger. People trust evidence, okay? ማስረጃ ስታቀርቡ ንግግራችሁ ክብደት ይኖረዋል። Category 4, addressing counter arguments. የተቃዋሚ ሀሳብ መልሶ መከራከሪያ አረቦች ምንድን ናቸው? ስትቃወሙ in a debate, the other side will disagree with you. How do you respond respectively? Look at this. You can acknowledge their point by saying, while my point makes a valid point, I would argue that, or it's important to recognize that, or then pivot to your perspective. You might point out, however, this does not take into account, or simply state, on the contrary, a sharp observation is my arguments, overlooks. This phrase show respect. Okay, you acknowledge their point, but then you explain, okay, why your view is stronger. እነዚህ ወረጎች ለተቃዋሚ ሀሳብ አክብሮ ስታሳዩ የራሳችሁን አቋም ለማስረዳት ይረዷቸዋል። Rebuttals or concessions, መልሶ ክርክርና ማመንጨት ምንድን ነው? Sometimes you need to strongly disagree, and sometimes you need to concede a small point to win a larger argument. For stronger rebuttals, use I must respectfully disagree with that assertion because, or this argument fails to consider. Okay, you can also say, while that may be true, the larger issue is, or more directly, that's simply not accurate because, notice the word respectfully, okay? Even when we disagree, we must be polite, okay? Debate is about ideas, not about, attacking people. Respectively, የሚለው ቃል በአክብሮት ስናሳይ ለመከራከር ይረዳል. So when conceding a point, you can show intellectual honesty with phrases like, I concede that there may be some merit, or you raise a good point, but admittedly there are challenges yet. Category 6, responding to questions and encouraging dialogue. Debate is a two-way street, by the way. And when responding to questions, you can start with what? That's an interesting question. However, I appreciate your inquiry, but consider a direct response could be what? In response to that, I would say, well, that's a concern. It's essential to remember that to foster a collaborative atmosphere, use encouraging phrases like, let's open the floor for questions, or I welcome any further challenges to my argument, or I'm interested in hearing your thoughts on this. Category 7, summarizing argument. ማጠቃለያ አረጎች. At the end of your speech, it's vital to summarize, your points. Begin with, in summary, I have presented, then to recap my points and conclude this section with, overall the evidence supports because a strong summary reminds the audience why your position is correct. ጠንካራ ማጠቃለያ በንግግራችሁ ዋና ነጥቦችን ያስታውሳል. Category 8, expressing confidence and inviting what? Reflection. Throughout your speech, project confidence, okay? Use phrases like, I'm confident that, it's clear that, okay, the evidence supports, and I firmly believe that. Also invite your audience to think more deeply. I invite you to think about, consider this perspective as we continue our discussion, okay? And what we must, contemplate is our powerful ways, by the way, to engage them. Category 9, transitioning and final closing statement. መዝጊያ አረጎችን ደግሞ Finally, use smooth transitions, okay, to guide your lesson. Say, moving on to my next point, or shifting gears, I would like to discuss And now let's examine and to end powerfully use this closing statement. In conclusion, I urge you to consider, or to wrap up my argument, I believe that, and ultimately the choice is clear. We must end with a final firm declaration. I appreciate your attention and I stand firm in my position that, and always remember, by the way, to say, thank you for your attention. A confident closing leaves what a lasting impression. Let's continue this important conversation. I look forward to hearing my opponent's response.
Opening statements. Ladies and gentlemen, today we are here to discuss. The topic we will debate is I stand in favor of / against. To begin with, I would like to present my position on presenting arguments. Firstly, I believe that the main reason for my stance is it is important to note that one key point is that. Furthermore, I would like to highlight. Additionally, research shows that. Let's consider the implications of supporting evidence. According to source, statistics reveal that studies have shown that, for example, this is evident when we look at addressing counterarguments. While my opponent makes a valid point, I would argue that it's important to recognize that. However, this does not take into account. On the contrary, my opponent's argument overlooks responding to questions. That's an interesting question, however. I appreciate your inquiry, but consider. In response to that, I would say, while that's a concern, it's essential to remember that conceding points. I concede that there may be some merit to. You raise a good point, but admittedly, there are challenges, yet rebuttals. I must respectfully disagree with that assertion because this argument fails to consider. While that may be true, the larger issue is summarizing arguments. In summary, I have presented. To recap my main points. Overall, the evidence supports, because. Closing statements. In conclusion, I urge you to consider. To wrap up my argument, I believe that ultimately, the choice is clear, we must. I appreciate your attention, and I stand firm in my position that encouraging dialogue. Let's open the floor for questions. I welcome any further challenges to my argument. I'm interested in hearing your thoughts on this. Expressing confidence. I am confident that it is clear that the evidence supports. I firmly believe that. Inviting reflection. I invite you to think about. Consider this perspective as we continue our discussion. What we must contemplate is transitioning between points. Moving on to my next point. Shifting gears, I would like to discuss. Now, let's examine. Conclusion phrases. Thank you for your attention. I look forward to hearing my opponent's response. Let's continue this important conversation.
Ladies and gentlemen, today we are here to discuss one of the most important questions for our country's future. The topic we will debate is, should Ethiopia prioritize economic development over environmental protection? I stand in favor of economic development as our primary focus right now. To begin with, I would like to present my position on why thousands of new jobs and factories matter more than preserving every single forest. Ethiopia needs progress. We need roads, dams, and industries. Our people need work today, not promises about trees for tomorrow.
Thank you, Lensa. Ladies and gentlemen, today we are here to discuss the same important topic. However, I stand against prioritizing economic development at the expense of our environment. To begin with, I would like to present my position on why protecting Ethiopia's natural heritage is not a luxury, it is a necessity. What good are factories if our children have no clean water to drink? What is development if our rainfall disappears because we cut down all our forests in Oromia and Amhara?
Firstly, I believe that our country cannot fight poverty with empty hands. The main reason for my stance is simple. Over 25 million Ethiopians still live below the poverty line. It is important to note that countries like China and South Korea became rich by building industries first and cleaning up later. One key point is that we cannot ask poor farmers in the highlands to worry about tree planting when they cannot feed their children. Furthermore, I would like to highlight that new factories mean new taxes. New taxes mean more money for schools and hospitals. Additionally, research shows that every industrial job creates 3 more jobs in transportation, trade, and services. Let's consider the implications of stopping development. Without growth, our young people will continue to risk their lives crossing the Sahara and the Mediterranean to find work in Europe.
Firstly, I believe that there is a false choice being presented here. The main reason for my stance is that we can have both development and environmental protection if we plan wisely. It is important to note that Ethiopia's economy depends on agriculture. And agriculture depends on rain. And rain depends on our forests. One key point is that when we cut down trees in the Bale Mountains, the water that flows into the Wabe Shebelle River decreases. Farmers downstream lose their crops. Furthermore, I would like to highlight that ecotourism is one of the fastest growing industries in the world. Tourists come to Ethiopia to see the Simien Mountains, the churches of Lalibela, and our unique wildlife. If we destroy these places for factories, we destroy that income too. According to a report from the Ethiopian Environment and Forest Research Institute, statistics reveal that our forest coverage has dropped from 35% in the early 1900s to less than 15% today. Studies have shown that this loss directly contributes to drought and soil erosion. For example, in the Tigray region, where deforestation has been severe, farmers now struggle to grow enough teff and wheat to feed their families. This is evident when we look at the increasing number of food aid requests coming from areas that once fed themselves. According to the World Health Organization, air pollution in Addis Ababa is already dangerous. If we add more factories without strict environmental rules, we will pay for it with our health.
According to the Ethiopian Investment Commission, statistics reveal that foreign investment has created over 800,000 jobs in the last 5 years alone. Studies have shown that countries with strong industrial bases have better healthcare, longer life expectancy, and more educational opportunities. For example, look at the industrial parks in Hawassa and Kombolcha. Thousands of young women now have jobs making clothes for export. They earn money, support their families, and gain independence. This is evident when we look at the new houses being built, the children staying in school longer, and the hope in these communities. According to the Ministry of Finance, every bear invested in industry generates 4 bear in economic activity. That is growth we cannot ignore.
While my opponent makes a valid point about jobs in industrial parks, I would argue that those jobs often come at a cost we don't see. It's important to recognize that many factory workers earn low wages and work in poor conditions. However, this does not take into account the long-term environmental damage these factories cause. On the contrary, sustainable development, like renewable energy and eco-friendly agriculture, creates jobs that last for generations. My opponent's argument overlooks the fact that when the river dries up, the factory cannot operate anyway.
While my opponent makes a valid point about environmental risks, I would argue that we can manage those risks with smart policies. It's important to recognize that no one is saying we should destroy everything. However, this does not take into account the urgency of poverty. A man whose child is hungry today cannot wait 10 years for an ecotourism project to maybe create a job. On the contrary, we must develop now and use the wealth we create to fix environmental problems later. My opponent's argument overlooks the basic truth that environmental protection is a luxury poor countries cannot always afford. Thank you both. I have a question for Lensa. How do you respond to the concern that unchecked development will destroy Ethiopia's natural beauty, the very thing that makes our country special?
Thank you both. I have a question for Lensa. How do you respond to the concern that unchecked development will destroy Ethiopia's natural beauty, the very thing that makes our country special?
That's an interesting question. However, I would ask you to think about what beauty means to a mother who cannot afford medicine for her sick child. I appreciate your inquiry, but consider this: Europe and America built their wealth by industrializing. Now they tell us to stay poor so they can visit our unspoiled nature. In response to that, I would say that Ethiopians deserve the same chance to build modern lives. While that's a concern, it's essential to remember that we can designate protected areas while still developing elsewhere.
Henrik, a question for you. What do you say to the farmer who needs land to grow food for his family but is told he cannot cut down trees?
That's an interesting question. However, it points to the real problem. We have failed to give farmers alternatives. I appreciate your inquiry, but consider this. If we provide farmers with fast-growing trees like eucalyptus for fuel and construction, they don't need to cut down native forests. In response to that, I would say that the government should invest in agroforestry training and provide seedlings for free. While that's a concern, it's essential to remember that farmers will protect forests if forests protect their livelihoods.
I concede that there may be some merit to your concerns about water and forests. You raise a good point, but I still believe we can manage these problems without stopping development. Admittedly, there are challenges, yet every country faces these challenges. The answer is better planning, not stopping progress.
I concede that there may be some merit to your argument about jobs and poverty. You raise a good point, but I would say that the jobs we create must be sustainable. Admittedly, there are challenges, yet the biggest challenge is thinking short-term. We must think about our grandchildren, not just next year's budget.
I must respectfully disagree with that assertion because we cannot ask poor people to think about grandchildren when they cannot feed their children today. This argument fails to consider the desperation of families in rural areas who have no options. While that may be true that forests are important, the larger issue is human suffering right now, today, in this moment.
I must respectfully disagree with that assertion because protecting the environment is protecting people. This argument fails to consider that environmental destruction creates refugees. People who must leave their land because it can no longer support them. While that may be true that poverty is urgent, the larger issue is that destroying nature creates more poverty in the long run.
In summary, I have presented three main points: jobs reduce poverty, industrial growth funds public services, and other nations have successfully developed first and cleaned up later. To recap my main points: first, over 25 million Ethiopians need economic opportunity now. Second, industrial parks are creating real jobs for real people. Third, we cannot let perfect environmental standards become the enemy of good development. Overall, the evidence supports prioritizing development because we cannot protect the environment if our people are too poor to care about it.
In summary, I have presented three main points. Our economy depends on healthy ecosystems, ecotourism offers sustainable income, and destroyed nature cannot be easily restored. To recap my main points: first, forests protect our water and rainfall. Second, environmental destruction creates more poverty than it solves. Third, we have examples of green development working in countries like Costa Rica and Rwanda. Overall, the evidence supports balancing development with protection because the two goals are connected, not opposed.
In conclusion, I urge you to consider the face of a young Ethiopian woman who wants to work, to earn, to live with dignity. Development gives her that chance. To wrap up my argument, I believe that Ethiopia's time is now. We cannot wait. We must build, grow, and create wealth for our people. Ultimately, the choice is clear: we must choose progress. We can fix environmental problems later. We cannot fix lost time. I appreciate your attention, and I stand firm in my position that economic development must come first.
In conclusion, I urge you to consider the words of our elders: if you cut down the last tree, the sky will fall. To wrap up my argument, I believe that true development works with nature, not against it. Ultimately, the choice is clear: we must choose a path that leaves something for our children and grandchildren. Forests grow slowly, but they can disappear in a single season. I appreciate your attention, and I stand firm in my position that protecting our environment is protecting our future.
Thank you, Lensa and Henrik, for this passionate and respectful debate. Now, let's open the floor for questions from our audience. I welcome any further challenges to these arguments. What questions do you have for our debaters?
I'm interested in hearing your thoughts on this. This is not an easy question, and reasonable people can disagree.
I invite you to think about what kind of Ethiopia you want to see in 2050. Consider this perspective as we continue our discussion. What we must contemplate is whether short-term gain is worth long-term pain.
Thank you for your attention. This debate reminds us that complex problems require thoughtful solutions. I look forward to hearing my opponent's response in future discussions, and I hope all of you will continue learning and practicing your English fluency with us. Let's continue this important conversation in the comments below. What do you think? Should Ethiopia prioritize economic development or environmental protection?
I am confident that with honest discussion, we can find the right path forward.
It is clear that the evidence supports working together, developers and environmentalists, for a better Ethiopia. I firmly believe that fluent English helps us share these important ideas with the world. Keep practicing, keep learning, and keep debating.
Before we finish, okay, let me give you 5 important tips for effective debating. Listen carefully to what the other side says, okay? You cannot respond to an argument you didn't hear. ተቃዋሚ ወገንን በጥንቃቄ አዳምጡ. Tip 2, stay calm and collected, okay? Don't let emotions control you, okay? Stay calm even when, someone disagrees with you strongly. ስሜት እንዲቆጣጠራችሁ አትፍሩ. እናንተ ናችሁ ስሜትን መቆጣጠር ያለባችሁ. Tip 3, be clear and concise, okay? Use simple, clear language. Don't use big words just to sound smart, okay? Clarity is more important than what complexity. ግልጽ ቋንቋ ተጠቀሙ. በጣም ጠንካራ ቃላት ለመጠቀም አትሄዱ. የሚያስፈልገው ግልጽ ሀሳብ እንጂ ውስብስብ ሀሳብ አይደለም. Tip 4, use body language. Your body speaks too. Maintain eye contact. Use hand gestures and stand confidently. የሰውነት ቋንቋ ይናገራል. ስለዚህ የሰውነታችሁ የምታሳዩት ነገር ቀላል አይደለም. Tip 5, practice. The more you practice this expression, the more natural they will become. Okay, practice with friends, practice alone in front of a mirror. Practice anywhere. Okay, በተደጋጋሚ ልምምድ ማድረግ ቁልፍ ነው. ስለዚህ today we learned about debate. What it is, why it's important, and how to conduct it. And most importantly, what the expressions we use. Remember, debate is not about winning or losing. It's about exchanging ideas, learning from each other, and improving our communication skills. ክርክር ማለት ማናሸነፍ ብቻ ሳይሆን ሀሳብ መለዋወጥ ነው። መማርና የመግባቢያ ችሎታችንን ማሳደግ ነው። The expressions on this whiteboard are your tools. Use them, practice them, make them part of your everyday English. Okay, in our next lesson, we'll actually practice debate, okay, using these expressions. Take a topic and go through a full debate together, okay? So don't miss it. Thank you for watching my English Fluency with Abiy Seyoum. እንግሊዝኛ ቃላት ለመናገር ከኔ ጋር ስለሆኑ አመሰግናለሁ. Practice these expressions and I will see you in the next lesson. Until then, goodbye and take care.